William Hague, Michaelmas term, 1981. I remember the first night as a fresher in 1979, crowding into the balcony of the debating chamber and seeing it for the first time. That's where I'd wanted to be. And there it was, a motion of no confidence in Her Majesty's government, with members of Parliament speaking and passionate debate. This is it, I'm here. This is one of the things I came to Oxford for. Some people become prominent in the union debates and they go straight for the presidency, or they hold one office and then they naturally run for the presidency. But I took it as slowly as I could, so I became I stood for the library committee, and then I stood for the standing committee, and then I stood for secretary of the union, which I was elected to, and then treasurer of the union, so I took a sort of sideways and a slightly upward step, and then stood for the presidency. I really tried, and this is one of the great things that the union introduces you to have friends and supporters who are not the same politically. One of the things you learn in the union is you might be a conservative like me, but you've got some great friends who support the Labour Party. And it might be convenient to support each other in some elections. So that was the mixture of tactics, but strategy for becoming the union president. I think I started my presidency with one that I particularly remember, which was on nuclear disarmament. That was the first debate, I think, of the Michaelmas term. Just as 2 years before, I had been the eager fresher crowding into the gallery. 2 years later, I was sitting in the president's chair with all the freshers crowding in, with the debating chamber completely packed. And I remember that because it was a really good debate. There was the late Sir John Nott, who was the defense secretary, very big figure in the government. And on the other side, E.P. Thompson, who was a very famous man of pacifist persuasion, who'd been a key figure in many of the marches for nuclear disarmament. And it's quite hard for people to imagine today what an issue that was. This was the height of the Cold War. Ronald Reagan had just come into power. So nuclear disarmament was, and the state of our defenses was really an intense debate where people thought the whole world was at stake. At that time, the official university student union was encouraging people not to take part in the union. And the people who were most responsive to that tended to be on the left of politics. Therefore, the membership of the union was smaller than it is today, and probably more conservative than it is today. So that was an advantage for people like me trying to get elected in the union. But it was by no means exclusively conservative, and set against that, it became a time in which the Conservatives were really unpopular, because the Thatcher government in its early days really went straight down to the bottom of the opinion polls, taking student opinion with it. So there was a lot of hostility to the Conservative government in those days. So there was a Conservative-inclined membership that was losing some of its faith in the Conservative Party. Therefore, all this interest in new parties in politics. It was this great time of excitement about the formation of the Social Democratic Party. And Shirley Williams came here. She was one of the gang of four who left the Labour Party. And she was soon here, I think in the summer of 1981, and I took part in that debate. And again, it was a packed debate, intense excitement about the state of British politics. Another member of the SDP gang of four came, Bill Rogers. So another big political figure. And yes, this was a time of debating realignment of politics. In that sense, it's similar to today, where we're wondering if the political parties will be realigned, will change their order of importance. And that was very much on the agenda then, and the Labour Party was being led by Michael Foot and was in a lot of difficulties. And a lot of people assumed that meant the Labour Party would wither away and die. Now, that isn't what then happened, of course, in later years, and there have been many Labour governments since then. So that's a bit of a lesson in history. There were many debates that weren't about party politics. In fact, one of my little triumphs was getting the president of the National Union of Prostitutes to come and take part in the debate about whether prostitution should be legalized. And that caused quite a stir. Well, I certainly would attribute part of whatever I've achieved in life to my time here at the Union, because it was a formative period for me, of course. If you're 18 years old, and then you spend a very large part of the next 2.5 years in here with vigorous arguments every day, either about what the Union should be doing or about the big issues of the world and the country, that makes a big impact on the mind of an 18 and 19-year-old. I sit here now as the Chancellor of the university, and no doubt the time I had here in the Union, meeting so many people, has always given me that deep affection for Oxford and some understanding of what the life of Oxford is like.